Hi everyone, Simon Foster here, Festival Director of the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival. Black-Eyed Susan is unlike any film we've programmed before, unlike any film I'd seen before. Writer-director Scooter MaCrae's latest is a complex and challenging morality tale of a sex android whose AI is programmed to satisfy men who physically and sexually abuse women. Her name is Susan, and bringing the character to extraordinary life in their first lead role is the fearless Yvonne Emilie Thälker, who joins us from New York City, a lovely autumn day over there. Hello, Yvonne, and welcome to the Science Fiction Film Festival YouTube channel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Simon.
Let's just establish how fearless you really were, or were you quietly terrified at taking on the role of Susan?
Um, it was definitely something, it was something I'd never done before, mainly in terms of the acting. I come from a modeling background and I've done quite a bit of like art nude modeling and glamour lingerie, so the nudity aspect wasn't quite as daunting, I think, as the acting aspect actually. Um, but I think what I think it was the acting that was daunting, and then it was some of the scenes. So it
Sure.
wasn't so much that I was nude, more so what I was doing in those scenes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get
What
to
was
those.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Clearly, first impressions are important. Tell us about the first time you read the script, about when the role of Susan first came into your life. You've kind of touched on your immediate thoughts there. How did Scooter approach you? How did the script come to you? And what were those initial meetings like?
Yeah, so Scooter initially hired me to do a modeling session. He dabbles in photography as well, and he came across my profile on Instagram, and he was just like, "Hey, yeah, I wanna work with this person." And I think he also, from what he said, when he saw my profile, he was immediately like, that's who I want for Susan.
Ah,
Which is so crazy to think that I somehow just like embodied, exactly what he had for this character. But we had a shoot, we had our initial shoot, and it was great. And then towards the end, he was like, "Hey, I don't know if this is something you'd be interested in, but I'm working on a movie and I have a script written, and I'd really like you to be considered for Susan." And I was like, "Okay." And I read, I think, a couple of like a scene or two, and I think we went through I just like kind of read through a scene or two first before I read the whole script. He just kind of wanted to see how I would read it. And my initial impression of the script was kind of it was not it was kind of it wasn't totally negative, but it wasn't the most positive either. At first I was kind of like, oh, a movie about a sex robot that gets hit by men, written by a man, written and
mm.
directed by a man. I was like,
Problematic, yes.
yes, I was like, come on, aren't we beyond this now? um, but then, I kept, I was still interested, so I was like, yeah, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna send you the whole script. He sent me the whole script, and I read it, and then I kind of was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more has more depth to it than
Yeah.
just a lot more depth to it than just that. And I think through the process of making the film, and even just like the process of doing the press and hearing what Scooter has to say about the film and about his own motivations, has really solidified for me that um, my initial impressions were wrong, and yeah, it's a lot deeper, it's a lot more complex than that. And um when after I had read the whole script, I was like, yeah, this is something I can get behind. And I felt like for me, at least the way I interpreted it, everyone's going to have a different interpretation,
Mm.
but I felt like it had a moral message that I could stand behind. It had a morality
Yes.
to it. It had some ethics to it. And you know, if it had just been like that initial impression I had, I wouldn't have done it. But I felt like, okay, this is something I can be a part of.
Okay, well that kind of mirrors my reaction to it as well when I heard about the film Out of Fantasia, and when I thought, okay, this could be challenging to program. This could be the sort of film I want as part of my festival. I've watched it twice now.
Mm.
And the first time around, I was certainly rattled by the violence and the nudity and the language elements that are still shocking to see in any film. But second time, I was struck by the tenderness and the quietness that comes out of especially in the second half of the film. How do you react when those that maybe haven't seen the film, or maybe look at the poster, or read the byline for it, and they, or the tagline, and they think, this shouldn't be made, like your initial reaction? How would you sell the film to those potential audience members?
I mean, first off, I don't blame them. You know,
Mm.
I think we as humans are all prone to first impressions, and I am definitely one of them. I will judge a book by its cover. So, you know, I understand that. And I've seen, you know, I had seen some comments on like the YouTube page when the initial trailer came out of people saying things or theorizing on what's going to happen, and I'm just like,
Mm.
just watch it, just watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for people, I think, you know, if you are some, if you know, I don't want to, I don't want to say to everybody who might be bothered by this content that like, oh, everyone should absolutely see it, because, you know, if you have domestic abuse in your past, or if it's just something that might be triggering for you, then maybe sit this one out. And like,
Yeah.
I think Scooter would also say something very similar. Like, it is not a movie for everybody. Um, and if some of the content might be triggering for some people, then sit this one out.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you know, I think if you are not in that camp, but if it's still, you know, if the tagline, if the description is still bothersome to you, I would say give it a chance. Go in with an open mind. Go in with a sense of kind of, you know, it has a lot in common with kind of the exploitation films and those kind of like, you know, 90s kind of movies. So you kind of, if you go in with thinking of it as kind of like a take on those, but a kind of more subversive
Hmm.
take on those, you know, if you kind of that's how I
Yeah.
see it at least. Yeah, I would say give it a chance and go in um just knowing that it's deeper than just a man hitting a woman.
Sure. Yeah, it's true. Um, I mean, that's an interesting point. I'm going to go off my script a little bit here, because you do touch on how films come at a certain point in time. We were all terrified of casual sex and AIDS when Fatal Attraction came out, or we were, and this speaks to a moment in time when AI is still kind of a mystery. The future of robotics is still kind of a mystery. This could be looked back on in a few years' time, and probably only a few years' time, and people will say it was a very prescient, it was a very forward-thinking film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Did you want me to speak to that?
No, I thought that was an expertly raised point on my part. I want to talk of, I want to talk about, let's talk about trust on the set of this film,
Mhm.
on a film like this. Clearly, shooting certain sequences meant an unprecedented degree of intimacy was required. How did
Yeah.
you and Scooter and your co-stars, you're all terrific in this film, attain that level of understanding, that comfort needed to film those scenes? Was it in rehearsal? Were there on-set rules? Were there safe words? Were there intimacy coordinators? How did the actual shooting of those at times very challenging scenes come about?
Yeah, so I mean, it may surprise some folks to learn that we didn't have safe words, we didn't have an intimacy coordinator. We had kind of one total go round Zoom rehearsal all together. So there wasn't actually a ton of discussion around, at least with the cast. I know that Scooter did a real, and everybody did a really good job with like hiring crew that would be very respectful. And the crew were awesome. Like there was, if anybody was making crew jokes, it was us, like the actors and the director and everybody. We would make jokes, but the crew was amazing. They handled everything completely professionally. Didn't bat an eye with me walking back and forth from, naked from the dressing room. But they I think a really big part of developing that trust is that Scooter and Amy and Diana and everybody else that I was kind of like, they were kind of my go-to people on set. They were always saying, if you're uncomfortable with anything, let us know. They would check in with me very frequently, are you okay? Is this okay? And we would kind of, before, obviously, it takes a lot of planning to do certain intimate scenes in a way that makes it look real, but keeps it, in real life, it's only PG, even though it looks R on the screen.
Sure.
So we would go through like, okay, this is how it's going to happen. Your hand is going to be here, and then your head is going to be here, but it looks like it's going to be there.
Sure.
So that was a big thing, like people just checking in with me and just being like, are you okay? If you're ever, and Scooter would repeatedly say, kind of just all throughout the process, if you're ever uncomfortable with anything, please tell me, let me know. And usually the times when I would speak out about something needing to be done, it was more just like, I need a drink, I need a break, I need to eat, or I'm really hot, I need to cool down.
Yeah.
Another thing that really helped with trust with my co-stars was, I think, just I could tell that we were kind of all just on, we didn't have a ton of discussion really about it. I think it was just a matter of, I just felt that they were all on the same page as me. I don't know, it sounds
Sure.
overly simplistic, but it really felt like we were all on the same page. They weren't there to take advantage of me. They were there to do a job, do it convincingly, but it's a job. And I was I was like, this is a job. This is, there's nothing actually sexual about it. So I felt like I could trust, and especially Damien, where most of the intimate scenes are with.
There's a terrific chemistry between you two in the film. It's really wonderful to watch, and that second half of the film is really moving.
Thank you. Yeah, I think part of that chemistry just comes from the fact that like us two as people were kind of viewing the job and the job that we had to do in a very similar way. So we were on the same page in terms of, make this look convincing, but it's still professional. We're still treating each other with respect. And we would just kind of get to know each other by just talking in between sets. And I think that's kind of how we built up, rapport, where we didn't kind of sit down beforehand and go like, oh, hold on one moment, I need to plug in my battery from my computer. Just give me 1 second. I don't want it to
Not at all. This all stays in the interview. No edits. It's all going to be on screen.
Okay, there we go. Oh,
lovely.
crisis.
That's better.
Yeah, so we didn't have a kind of big discussion between us beforehand about this, which I realize maybe that's a bit unconventional. Maybe a bigger production would have done that. But I think it speaks to the fact that Scooter and Amy and everybody that hired these other actors chose really good people.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. That's what felt like watching it too. Yeah.
Yeah, they chose people that I could trust, and I hope I hope that they felt the same level of trust in me. Obviously, the power roles are, I'm the one in the more vulnerable position, but I hope that they also felt the same level of trust in me. So we would just kind of get to know each other as it just while we were shooting, just by talking and
That
just being
often
like, oh,
helps. That often helps. Yes, exactly.
yeah.
I I mean, one aspect of it we should discuss is the science fiction aspect of it. You're playing an android who develops understanding. That places you in some pretty rarefied acting space alongside the likes of Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner or Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina. And what was central to bringing the robot aspect of Susan to life? Did you do much research into that, or what was Scooter's and your way of developing the fact that she is a mechanical creature?
Yeah, so I didn't do much research. I will say that I am a big sci-fi fan. I love sci-fi. I love reading I'm reading the Murderbot, the
Oh,
first
wow. Yeah, it's
right
a
now.
great one. Yeah, I
Speaking
know
of
it.
androids, a fantastic, absolutely fantastic. If anybody likes reading sci-fi, absolutely pick that up. Um, but I've been a lover of sci-fi movies and books. Like I've been reading Philip K. Dick for a long time, and this Scooter's methodology and script has, reminds me of Philip K. Dick a little bit.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of his inspirations as well. So I think just partially because I kind of come from that background of being exposed to that type of media. I know that when I watched Prometheus, one of the alien films,
Sure.
I was impressed. And this is I did not do this for research, but this was way back when I first watched it, and I watched an interview with Michael Fassbender where he's talking about how he approached David. I think that's the character's name,
Yes,
David.
yeah.
And I was really impressed by the way he approached David with this kind of coolness, but it's still human. It's like a cool human kind of way. And he said that he kind of mimicked his character a little bit off of the character in Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, sure.
Um, somehow, it's these weird little connections, but I think I thought about that a little bit and I was like, okay, do I want to kind of take that, David robot from Prometheus route? And I was like, okay, a little bit, but I knew that Susan also had to be sexy, which that is not, the robot isn't, the android is not sexy in Prometheus. So
Hmm.
I discussed with Scooter mainly kind of her voice. Because she's not a terribly physical character. She can't move a ton, and
Hmm.
the movements she does have are kind of basic. Um, so like in real life, I talk a lot with my hands, and I'm pretty expressive with my face. But I just kind of was like, okay, I think I'm gonna tone down the expressiveness in the face, tone down, just general expressiveness, but, you know, find a balance. I wanted to find a balance in between it being a robotic voice and a totally human voice. I
Sure.
didn't want it to be totally human, but I did not want it to be totally robotic. I didn't want it to be, you know, totally like a machine.
Yep.
And she also had to be sexy. So that's an additional thing. So I kind of worked through with Scooter just talking about like, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of doing it like this. And he was like, oh yeah, that's really good. And then, we kind of tweaked it just a little bit to kind of find that balance between she's a little stilted, she's a little formulaic, but she's sexy and she still sounds warm enough that it's enticing.
The inner life comes through. That's what I found in it. There was that sort of robotic element to it, especially those moments when she's struck. But there is still a humanity that comes out of that, and I think that's credit to your performance. Um, Finally, I guess I guess we can't gauge what audiences will take away from Black Eyed Susan. You mentioned before, you come with your baggage, you go with your baggage, you've already got your preconceived. It's the sort of film that works on many levels too, depending upon the viewer. But can I ask what message, if any, you take away from the film? How do you hope the film is interpreted?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think there's two main things for me. There's a lot of different things I think people can take away.
Yep.
One thing that, is something Scooter has mentioned as, kind of one of the reasons why he made this film is just this kind of idea of no man is beyond engaging in violence. And that's not to say that, I don't, in saying that, I don't mean, and this is tricky. It's tricky to talk about. It's tricky to
Yeah,
talk
it
about.
is.
I'm not trying to, offend anyone or anything, but I think what Scooter was kind of trying to say is that not that like, oh, every man will do this or every man is going to or has it ingrained in them biologically. No. He just meant we live in a society that teaches men to behave in certain ways, and I think it's uh it's irresponsible for men to think of themselves as, oh, I'm completely beyond, like, kind of like, oh, I would never ever ever do that, when in reality it's kind of like, in a different universe, if one or two things were tweaked, you might be a violent person.
Sure.
And I kind of see his message about masculinity is kind of similar to how if I were to watch a movie about racism and a movie about, like, you know a movie that was trying to bring, awareness to white people and say, look, you may not think of yourself as a capital R racist, but you are still capable of racism, right?
Yep.
And that's, I can't relate to the, being a cis man kind of thing, and that type of toxic masculinity, but I can kind of relate to the issue in terms of, like, we are all capable of engaging in bigotry of some kind, whether that's, for me being a white person or, whatever, like, it's not, we don't need to think of it as like, oh, that's something other people do.
Hmm.
Because no, it's so pervasive in society that even if you don't do, the really big bad things, what are you contributing to it in small ways?
Sure.
um and I think Scooter was kind of almost imagining himself in like an alternate world, kind of with this film, like, I think he said something like, this is not my personal history. He was saying, this is not me, this movie does not represent me, but it's almost like a what if.
Yeah, but it could be.
um yeah, and then the second thing that I take away from it, and that I am hoping that, other people take away from it, is the just frankly the dangers of AI and how we're using it. um I know, people say, like, AI is here to stay, it's here to stay, it's not going away, and to an extent I agree with that.
Hmm.
um but I think the way that we're using it right now is incredibly uh it's terrible for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
And I think we need to be much wiser about how we're using it. And
Hmm.
Susan being an AI unit and using that kind of AI technology, we're definitely not, and using it in such a terrible way,
Hmm.
uh, we're not too far away from that as a reality. So
Yvonne, It's so lovely to be able to talk to you about this incredible film to get some insight. Black Eyed Susan screens Saturday, September 21 here in Sydney at the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival. Tickets via our festival page, which I'll put below, and via the Event Cinemas page. I hope you come down to Australia someday. I'd love to get this insight and meet you and talk more about this incredible role and see where your career and future goes. So it's so lovely for you to have made this time to speak with us, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much. I would love to come to Australia sometime. Hopefully I can make that happen. Your country seems absolutely lovely. And
Yeah, it's
thank you
okay.
so much for well, it's very exotic for Americans. You have to understand.
All
Thank you
righty.
so much for having Black Eyed Susan at your festival. Everybody who's a part of the film really appreciates it. I really appreciate it. And I really hope that people enjoy it and have fun. Even if you hate the movie, I hope you still have fun.
That's lovely of you. Thanks so much, Yvonne. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
That was